Hello everyone, today we're taking a look at the GEP-RC Thinking P16 HD. Running 1103, 8000 kV motors, 40mm quad blade gem fan props. Of course, the star of the show is going to be the Caddx Vista. It is running the Nebula camera. The all-in-one board down in there is a 12 amp ESC with an F411 flight controller. Mine came with a Crossfire receiver even though I don't have Crossfire. So I wired up the Vista to be my receiver. The battery lead is loosely secured down. Motor wires look like they have heat shrink on them, like they've been spliced together, kind of like the battery lead. This kit uses all Phillips headed screws except for the two securing the camera. It weighs almost 68 grams. I flew it on these 3S batteries. With the GNB 350 it weighs 95 grams. With the MyLipo 333 battery it weighs 95.5 grams. We're going to start off with the inside flight. Now, I want to temper your excitement a little bit by what you might see. I posted a teaser on Facebook the other day, and several people were pretty excited about the quality of the footage. Of course, this is not a cheap quad, but also this is nighttime. There's no sunlight, and that is important for the Nebula, oddly enough. It does not seem to like the sun, so make sure you watch through to the outside flight as well so you know exactly what you're getting into if you do want to look into getting one of these. It ranges in price depending upon if you get it without a receiver, meaning you would use the DJI radio at about a $239, and then it goes all the way up to like $270 if you get the Crossfire version. So the price is not light, and neither is the quad. I was surprised at how well it flew, especially on 3S in the house. I did try it on 2S. I didn't care for 2S. I wanted that low-end throttle response to make sure I could correct any of my mistakes when I get out of shape. On 2S it just felt a little loose. Of course, I should have probably retuned it for 2S. This has obviously been tuned for 3S. They did not use the sliders in the tune. It is running Betaflight 416. So if you look at that, you'll see the little button in Betaflight saying enable sliders. So they use the numbers and to get their PID tune where it is. You can tell I kind of slide around, and that's partly due to the weight. You know, we're pushing 100 grams here, so you're not going to be able to stop on a dime. So you're going to have the right skill set in order to be able to fly it around, depending upon how tight your space is. And of course, we do have that outside flight. It's more of a cruisy flight, more of a sin whoop type of flight. They'll be coming up here a little bit later. And I found a few interesting lines that I wish turned out a little bit better, but I'm going to show you that flight anyways because it's probably one that I'll revisit as far as those lines go. The flight time here inside the house is going to run about 2.5 minutes. Of course, the quad was armed before you started to see the flight footage, probably about 10 to 15 seconds armed before I started the flight, or you saw the flight footage, because you can only start recording when you're armed with the Vista unit. So you probably can get some more flight time out of it than what you see here. There was a little skip there. This is actually the same flight footage as I posted on Facebook, so you can pair it up if you want to. I think most people thought I crashed right there when I kind of skimmed off the floor. Got a bit of an awkward takeoff here. Unfortunately, I had hit a switch inadvertently, and I found myself in horizon mode, and it took me a minute. You kind of see me waggle it there a little bit, trying to figure out what's going on. I kind of recognize that, and then I get the switch put into acro mode, and we take off into a more smooth cruising sort of style of flight, and I think this is what many people would want to do for this sort of quad. It's not going to be an aggressive quad to fly. You can fly it more aggressively. I did spend part of 2 or 3 batteries kind of doing some stuff that I might normally do, but again, you're towing around 100 grams on 40mm props. So the expectations that it's going to be fast, it'll carry some inertia because it's 100 grams, but as far as having much punch, being very agile, that's just not its forte. It's got way too much weight. This Vista with the camera weighs almost as much as, its typical 75mm quad does. So it's going to be more of a slow cruise. You get some scenic footage of an area. Some people like to cruise, and there's nothing wrong with that. Fly how you like to fly. And I wanted to make sure that I got as many people to stick around for this portion of the video, because I think it's very important to see this camera in sunlight, because it can be very misleading if there's not much sunlight. Even the footage I plan to show you about when we leave this footage and go back to the desk to discuss some of the properties of the quad, things that I kind of learned over my time with it. That is a daytime inside flight, but it wasn't full bright, so it actually still looks pretty good. We had some odd pop-up showers to where you would get like a 5-minute rainstorm that would actually be pretty heavy, and then the sun would come out for 2 or 3 hours. And then you get another 4-minute rainstorm. I was actually sitting at cello, waiting for my daughter who plays cello to get done, and you know they practice social distancing and everything, and they all wear masks all the time. But so I was sitting in the parking lot waiting for her, and I actually watched this wall or curtain of rain just move towards me as I sat there in the van. It started out, I noticed it probably 30 yards away. It was in the alley across the street, and then it just worked its way to me in about 4 or 5 minutes. It was pretty interesting. I was telling her about it on my way home. So we had some odd weather, and that's the footage that you're going to see back at the desk, the kind of picture-in-picture. That little going down the creek and then kind of navigating through there, that's one of the advantages of the HD or digital FPV system, is you can make those things out even with a Nebula camera. It would have been nice to have that really good high-quality video, because I think that was something that I enjoyed as I've watched this footage back, was that pass that I made kind of down the creek and then navigating out the little shrubbery and then going through that hole in the root, or the root that's kind of arched up. I enjoyed that pass. I wish that would have been a little bit higher quality video that we'd had there. Outside flight should come in somewhere around 3.5 minutes. You can use the YouTube scroll bar down there to kind of discern when the outside flight starts and stops and kind of do the own math in your head. I failed to write it down on my notepad this time. This isn't going to be fast. It isn't going to be agile. It's not going to have huge punch outs, even though it's running 3S. 3S is more about giving it the flight time and maybe some low end torque that it needs. Inside, like I said, I did find I needed that 3S torque at the low end to be able to make some of the quick responses that I need to be able to do in order to be able to fly something this weight in the house. I'll have links down in the video description if you want to check it out. It's odd how many times I'm asked how much something is. You can always check those links down in the video description. I think the first thing to talk about is the weight. If I were to completely take this Crossfire antenna and receiver out of there, probably save close to 2 to 3 grams maybe. I guess we could take these zip ties off as well. That might be 1/10 of a gram each. So there is some weight saving I could have done. I just decided to leave the receiver in there and everything zip tied so I could show it to you. If you happen to be a Crossfire user and you wanted to know how this would look when it comes as far as your receiver, where it's placed goes, I would have it there to show you. So I just kind of tucked one of my wires down along the side of the frame, and then I wired up my Vista to do that. You might be noticing this little section of cabling over there. That's something to be concerned of. You know, if that gets into your prop, that cuts off your camera. That's a bad gig. They've got it taped up, if you can see there, if I get my fingers out of the way. They've got it taped up there to keep it out of the way, and I bring it up. It wasn't a problem for me. It didn't hack anything up, but it's awful close to the prop. Look at how close that is. You know, you have a bang, you bump into a hard tree or something, and you continue to fly, or you take back off. That could be a problem. So, and then you've got the stack here. There is a separation, if you can tell, between the Vista and the flight controller. That's a good thing. They've also got some wires tucked up underneath it, so it should keep it in a crash from touching one another, shorting out and causing a fire or damage. Of course, as I alluded to in the intro, this isn't real tight, but it is something. It's better than nothing. It does keep it there. This battery tray will really only fit batteries of this shape and size unless you want to snip this battery tray off and then run a strap through there. You can do that, otherwise these fit. And they're pretty tight too, really. But we've seen this before. So they're not going to go anywhere once you get them in there, and they fit kind of equally tight. I think the G&Bs are actually a touch tighter. Yeah, just a little bit. It's hard to tell. I know it's in video. It's hard to discern what I'm doing here. But I felt the G&Bs were a touch tighter as far as getting into the battery tray. You know, it's an expensive kit, as all these digital quads are. You know, the price point jumped when we got into Air units and Vista units and HD FPV. It was fun to fly. I enjoyed flying it inside the house, even though I'm not accustomed to the radio that I'm using. I guess I would say I'm a 30% digital flyer, or DJI flyer, if you want to go that far. I spend most of my time still on analog, so using that radio, it's just a big, thick radio. I thought I did fairly well, and I also thought that it flew really well. I enjoyed flying with it. It's just that camera that's holding us back. Is it possible that there's a software update that we can get through? Where to go? Where to go? there it is. Through the USB port to update the camera and to improve that footage. I have my doubts, because I would have think they'd have done it already if they could, but I'm not a developer of this sort of stuff. Maybe you guys know better than I do. That's the one thing I would like to see. I also looked at if this could fit, if you could wedge in the standard DJI camera in there, and I'm just not sure. If we look at it real closely here, it does look like the DJI camera could possibly fit in there. Of course, you're not going to use both screws, you're just going to use one. And even if it doesn't natively just fit right in there, you might be able to wedge it in there. Of course, that was going to add 5 grams to your load, so it's something to consider if you liked what you saw and you just thought, well, I'll just swap out the camera. Well, it's going to change things, because 5 grams is still quite a bit. What is it? Not quite 10%, so about 8.5% of the total weight of the quad itself. And it's something you're going to have to account for probably in the PID tune as well. So little tweaks there might be necessary. I think something else that they need to do is they need to go high side on these whoops. They need to be up all the way around. You can see this is a different sort of design though. They're kind of following that GEP-RC model that they've got of having the 3 spurs that then branch out kind of like a fork in all the different directions, and then we've got high sides right here. Hopefully you can see that on all the ducting. It's always got a high side, and then in here we've got a low side, and I think this low side needs to go away, especially in the case of our wiring. Long term, I would probably take a piece of tape and wedge it in there. Let me get something to point with. I'd take a piece of tape and probably stick it to this camera and then wedge it up underneath here and back behind here, just to make sure, and of course down below here, to make sure all those wires stay out of harm's way, because of course that could be a pain if you, especially if you go down and maybe you're flying over water. That would be a bad gig. They're definitely not giving them away. If you want to check them out, I have a link down in the video description below. Otherwise, if you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the comments section below. I appreciate your time. And thanks for watching.